Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. He is Daniel Gallen. It is early a.m. here in Beaver Stadium. We are closing up shop. They've shut the lights down on the field as of 2 a.m., but it was quite the evening here in Happy Valley. Penn State prevailed 21-7 over the Fighting Illini. Number 9 in the country were Penn State coming into this matchup, number 19 Illinois. And so this one became much more of a showcase nationally than we anticipated it would going into the season. Ultimately, after a dicey start in which Illinois drives down the field, has a lengthy touchdown drive to open this matchup, Penn State rights the ship, defensively has a big rebound. They're able to lean on their offensive line despite some moving pieces up front. And ultimately, their running backs, Kate Charnell and Nick Singleton, put together a fantastic performance. And the result was 21 unanswered points, a 21-7 victory. And Daniel, while we're going to get into all the main points from offense and defense, the highs and lows, we got to address the fact that James Franklin 1 week ago, coming out of that Kent State matchup, put it out there. He's looking for whiteout energy. And then that was a big storyline all week. And what we heard from players and coaches, they showed up in white tonight, 109,000 plus. And by the end of this contest, James Franklin went onto the podium and said there were 7 plays at least that he felt like the crowd impacted the matchup and helped Penn State. And I got to tip my cap because this was a fantastic environment for a matchup that a lot of us were kind of looking beyond when we got into this 2024 campaign.
The Penn State fan base definitely delivered tonight at Beaver Stadium. Coming into the game, I was really curious as to what this all was going to look like, what it was going to sound like, based on James Franklin trying to do a sort of grassroots whiteout. Not something that is on the calendar that people are planning for. The people who bought tickets back in April, I don't think they were, or whenever tickets go on sale, I don't think they were planning on coming to a whiteout tonight. But you got here, you looked around the parking lots when we walked into the stadium, saw a lot of white. When the students came in, saw a lot more white there. And by the time it was kickoff, it felt like a whiteout. It looked like a whiteout. It wasn't technically a whiteout, but it was pretty darn close. And the environment, I think, lived up to that. You talk about Beaver Stadium being a really, really tough place to play. I think tonight showed it. And when you talk about a game that was, I think you could say it was one on the margins, 21-7, Penn State didn't get that 2-score lead until pretty late. You need every edge that you can get. And I think that Penn State definitely got a boost from that crowd today.
We knew that this was a program coming in, the Fighting Illini, who had already dealt with a road crowd, that adverse kind of environment. Last Friday night in Nebraska, they were able to pull out an overtime victory, rode that momentum in here. And to me, Daniel, it felt like worst case scenario to open the contest for Penn State because Illinois takes the ball first. They march down the field, they get a touchdown and go ahead 7-0. And all of a sudden they picked up where they left off. I think when we were talking about our keys to the game on Thursday during our pregame episode, I said the most important thing Penn State can do is to ensure that Illinois doesn't pick up where it left off. And lo and behold, we get through that first possession and all of a sudden my upset alert mind is going because I'm thinking Luke Altmaier looks comfortable. Penn State's defense looks a little frazzled. Are they going to have to lean on the offense to get going here? Ultimately, it didn't turn out that way, and it's credit to Penn State for kind of shaking things off and righting the ship over the course of this matchup. But I thought Illinois was ready for this experience, where they were ready for this environment. Ultimately, we saw that Penn State, I think, has some significant advantages across the football field, and that played out over the course of 4 quarters. But Illinois, you come away from this game, I think you've got to carry some respect for them. I'm curious to see what they're going to do the rest of the way. I think they'll still be ranked coming out of this game. And at the end of the day, this felt like from start to finish the biggest test that this Penn State team has encountered thus far in 2024. We kind of anticipated it might look that way. I know Bowling Green gave them a heck of a first half, but Daniel, this is one that really was going down to the wire. And until they got some late takeaways off Luke Altmaier and things started to unravel for that Illinois offense, you were wondering where this one was going to land after 60 minutes.
Yeah, this was definitely a real true test. I think that when you talk about the Bowling Green game, that was a little more like a pop quiz. See what you can figure out on the fly in a situation you weren't necessarily expecting. But today was something where you came in, both sides had the study guide, both sides knew really what they were in for, and they were able to deliver. I just, I just thought that the way that both teams played was a really good test for Penn State. I think this is an experience as you get further along in the season, that it's one that they're going to be able to draw on and look back to this game and saying that we won this game when a lot of stuff wasn't going right. We've been in this place before and we've won. How can we spin this forward? I'm really interested to see what can happen because, yeah, like you said, when Illinois went right down the field, we just talked about the energy, how loud it was, how great of a crowd it was. It got quiet here.
Mm-hmm.
It really, they took the air out of the building right away. And it's a credit to Penn State for getting the fans back into it, for the fans coming back into it, etc. But I just thought Illinois went out and they landed that first punch. And so you needed to see how Penn State could counterpunch. And they did a very, very nice job there.
Yeah, 11 plays, 75 yards, more than 5 minutes off the clock for Illinois' opening possession. Altmyer was 5 of 6 during that drive. Penn State helped them out a little bit. They had a pre-snap penalty. They had a post-play penalty for 15 yards. And we'll talk about penalties a little bit later. That's something that James Franklin's still very concerned about when it comes to his Nittany Lions' early season development. But Penn State responded right away to that, Daniel. They went down the field, a touchdown of their own on the opening possession. It was a long drive for them as well, just about 4 minutes of clock to get to the end zone. And Tyler Warren, right off the bat here, I mean, he has been Mr. Versatile throughout the season, but we saw it in the opening possession. He took a snap and ran 3 yards for a touchdown at the goal line. Harrison Wallace was involved early with a 20-yard catch. You saw Nick Singleton pop up with that first possession. But right off, kind of right out of the gate, it felt like, okay, Penn State was ready to land a counterpunch. And that was a good sign. And as this went on, and we're going to focus on defense really to begin the first half of the show, that was the difference. I mean, we'll get into the ground game, but what they were able to do defensively and keeping Illinois from having those kind of long possessions that were going to keep Penn State's offense off the field. They had a few more, but after the first half, that was really it. And Penn State was able to put them in a stranglehold. And I don't think any of us necessarily anticipated that coming out of the first half because it was back and forth, and both these teams were kind of marching on each other a little bit. Only one of these defenses came out of halftime and put the clamps on.
Yeah, the Penn State defense, I think, deserves a lot of credit. It was the type of game where the offense was just not quite there. You miss a couple field goals. You don't convert a fourth down. You squander some opportunities, and that's where you need your defense to stand up and to have a couple shutdown possessions when you need them to pick you up. And I thought the defense really did that today. 13 tackles for loss, which is a huge number, and then 7 sacks. That was the talking point this week was, James Franklin not worried about the pass rush. Abdul Carter, Denied, and Sutton got their first sacks last week against Kent State, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. Zane Durant's been impactful on the interior. He also had a sack tonight, but it was very kind of like it'll be fine. And that showed tonight that Penn State has a lot of talent. They were able to take away the run. And then on top of that, they were able to put Illinois in a hole and force Illinois to go to the air. We know that how Brett Bielema wants to play and have stuff go on the ground, but Penn State forced Illinois to put it on Luke Altmyer's shoulders, and then they were able to really pin their ears back. I mean, you think about it, 7 sacks with how the game flow was today. If they had been able to convert some of those opportunities earlier and put Illinois in that hole earlier, who knows what else this could have looked like. But I think if you're the defense, got to figure out the starts. Another slow start, but the way that they responded to that and the way they finished out, you're just very impressed with that.
So Illinois had the ball. They're driving, closing minutes of the first half. They get down the field, third down setup. They're in Penn State territory. Momentarily appeared that the Nittany Lions stopped them, but then Tony Rojas is called. He's flagged for unnecessary roughness. It was a penalty that James Franklin had a lot to say about in postgame. He did not agree with it, but that was the call, and it sounds like it's the studio analyst, whoever they had, the official expert in NBC's broadcast booth, apparently explained to you folks. We didn't watch the broadcast, but why that was the right call. James Franklin disagreed, but that set them up really well. And it was right on the doorstep of halftime. They had 1st and goal from the 2-yard line. And this is where James Franklin again said this was a moment where the crowd made an impact. There was right in front of the student section. You see a high snap. There was a false start that was involved. There was an intentional grounding call that took some time to sort through for the refs. And that 1st and goal from the 2 turned into 4th and goal. I think it was from like the 24 or something like that.
It was 27 by the end of it.
27 once you get that false start penalty, and it results in a missed field goal for Illinois. And then Penn State ultimately had a few plays to run and try to take a lead before halftime. Didn't work out for them. But after that point, Daniel, and this is also a stat that James Franklin brought to us in the postgame, 39 total yards gained by Illinois after that moment. And I'll tell you what, it really felt like after that penalty, Illinois was going to at least get a field goal from the situation, a short field goal try, maybe punch it in from the 2-yard line with a few plays. And instead, you go into the half at 7-7, you come out, you march down the field with that opening possession and take a 14-7 lead early in the second half. And really, your defense is able to give you a little bit of breathing room. Although it was a 1-score game the rest of the way, this defense, basically did its diligence to not force Penn State fans to sweat this one out.
Definitely. I think that you did have a little bit of worry in the back of your mind. Like if you let a team like Illinois hang around, there is a chance that you could get burned. That's something that's always on the back of your mind. But at the same time, once you got into that second half, Illinois was just not moving the ball. And you started to see things unravel for them a little bit. We talked a lot about Luke Altmaier being such a careful player, not turning the ball over. I know that he had the interception that AJ Harris grabbed late in the game, but AJ Harris should have had one earlier. Abdul Carter just made a really nice play to bat down the ball, coming up from coverage. But AJ Harris was standing right behind Abdul Carter, was in perfect position to get an interception. So, they were able to get Illinois back on its heels a little bit, put them in a stressful situation that maybe they hadn't really been in before, and they took advantage of it. And I think that's what you need to see out of the defense in a stage like this. You need them to pick you up. You need them to make plays on their own. They could have gotten on the scoreboard too if it wasn't for a block in the back penalty on Zion Tracy on AJ Harris's interception return. But I think you just felt really good about it, which, how you felt in the fourth quarter versus how you felt in the first quarter, it's a bit of a roller coaster.
I had people, I don't know about your tweets and all that, but I had people calling for Tom Allen's job early in this game. And by the end of the game, you had the 7 sacks, you had 13 tackles for loss, you had 7 points allowed, and you held Illinois about 150 yards fewer than their average total yardage output through the first 4 games of the season. They were right around, I think, 200 and less than 240 yards on the day-to-day total offense. That number actually 219 for total offense from Illinois versus 374 for the Nittany Lions, and 1.1 yard per rush. I think that was really the big emphasis for Penn State, was to really put this game on Luke Altmaier. I know there was a lot of respect for how he started the season, but making them one-dimensional, and once it was clear they were a one-dimensional team, like you said, if you can have a little more efficiency on offense, you don't miss 2 field goals, you don't have a turnover on downs on a red zone situation. Maybe you're able to put the pressure on Altmaier earlier, but it started to unravel for him late. And I thought he really played with a lot of moxie. He was the kind of quarterback he was described as to us. But as this thing got later and you saw the Abdul Carters of the world start to wear down on him, Penn State really was able to land those large punches late. And let's get to Abdul Carter, because I think Mark Brennan named him his player to watch for this matchup and said this is the setting where number 11 needs to really show that he is an elite level defender, a game wrecker. And we definitely saw that come to fruition today. 1.5 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss. And he's a guy that just seemed to be passionately invested in this matchup. The way he was riling up the student section, the way he was riling up his teammates. I know, speaking to some of them after the game, they were highly complimentary of the mindset and the enthusiasm he brought to the field. And he was lining up in a few different spots. I mean, we saw him in a 3-point stance. We saw him dropping back into coverage. We saw him bat down a ball. And I think this was really our first opportunity to get a good look at how Tom Allen is going to plan things out for Abdul Carter the rest of the way here. And we waited a long time for him to make this kind of an impact last year. I think you remember that. We probably had to wait until November till when Abdul Carter was really making plays like this. But we saw it pop up in non-conference play, although he wasn't relied upon as much. He didn't need to play this volume of snaps. Here, high volume situation. He's out there a bunch. I thought he answered the call, and we got a really good indication of the caliber of player that Abdul Carter can be and the game record that he can be.
We've talked a lot about the Penn State offense sort of layering things on and showing different wrinkles under Andy Kotelnicki. And the defense has been doing something a little bit similar. And I think Abdul Carter is a big example of that. We saw him lining up at linebacker a little bit more. The first couple of times I saw him do that, he rushed. And so you have him getting that running start into the line. When he made that transition, that was something else that James Franklin and Deion Barnes talked about, was that he was going to have to adjust to having the lineman on him right away, not getting that head of steam going in. And then as it went on, we saw him, standing up over the interior, dropping into coverage, spying a little bit, being able to come up and make plays. It was just really, really unique. And I think that Tom Allen, we've talked a little bit about communication and him getting comfortable and being back in that DC role. And I think that as Penn State gets more comfortable, as this defense gets more comfortable, we're going to see more things like that. I think we saw maybe Tom Allen's equivalent of the Prowler package, which was the third down package under Manny Diaz that really caused some havoc and allowed Penn State to get really creative. I think I talked about it last week against Kent State. We saw some dime defense. We saw a decent number of formations where Tony Rojas was the only linebacker on the field. Just these different things that Penn State is doing to get all these defenders onto the field, utilize them, maybe cover up for some of the depth issues that they've had. And I think that it's worked very nicely, and it's been pretty interesting to follow. And Abdul Carter is a big part of it. What you saw today, I think that's the Abdul Carter that a lot of people have been expecting to see, the one that is getting that first round buzz. That one is being seen as one of the best defenders in the country. So, we'll see, how this looks really as it moves forward.
He was also credited with 8 pressures when you look at PFF and how they logged stats for this game. And it felt like that. I mean, he just was swarming around the football. Him and Denai Dennis Sutton both right around 50 snaps on the game. Jalen Reed was over 60 total snaps. And I thought he was particularly impactful on the afternoon or on the evening. I know that you went through some audio from him after and post game for our coverage at Lions247.com. But I thought Jalen Reed, once again, kind of mirroring what we saw in week 1, just all over the place. Yeah, he was in the backfield at times. He had a sack that came late in the game. He had 9 total tackles that led the way for this team. He had another QB hurry along the way. And it just felt like you're missing KJ Winston. You're missing some of those plans that you thought you had in place. And here's Jalen Reed resurfacing in a significant way. And I think we were wondering, well, without KJ Winston on the field, is this going to inhibit maybe what we think Jalen Reed can be in 2024? And I think today was a really nice response from number 1, because it felt like he was flashing in all the right moments.
Definitely. We did see them try to use Dejon Lane at safety for, I think, one drive and put Reed down back at that lion spot. The first play of that drive, Illinois uncorked a really big run, flipped the field, and it seemed then Penn State, I think, got back more into that base look that they played most of the game in. But I think that the fact that they were able to free up Reed and allow him to make different plays and to be around the ball, despite him still being in that safety spot, I think that's a testament to him as a player, him putting himself in these positions, and then also Tom Allen, Anthony Poindexter figuring out the right way to make it work for him.
Yep, he was excellent, and Kobe King too. We'll give a tip of the cap.
Yes.
His direction, I thought, especially early on, the redshirt junior team captain linebacker was playing at a very high level. He's also the guy that we know is responsible for communicating with those teammates, and based on the play calls, he's wearing the helmet that has the headset in it. And Kobe King today came through with 7 tackles, 1.5 of them for loss. He also had a sack on the day, one of those 7 that they bunched up. And so it just felt like kind of the guys that you need to be able to like lean on defense. Those were the guys who really stepped up. And without KJ Winston, we did not see much Dejon Lane today. He was under 10 snaps after playing 25 snaps last week against Kent State. We wondered how much was going to carry over from Kent State, that non-conference finale versus this Big Ten opener. They really kept it tight with that safety situation. Jalen Reed, Zakee Wheatley. I will say, though, before we go over to offense, Dakari Nelson played quite a
Yes.
bit more than I anticipated.
Started.
He started this game, and we did have him as the number 1 Sam linebacker on our depth chart. We have our projected depth chart every week that we put out on Thursday night or Friday mornings. And we thought that Nelson was going to be kind of the guy who was going to be the first man in, but I didn't think he would start. I didn't think he would play, 20 plus snaps like he did today. And credit to him, but Tamir Robinson was under 10 snaps. We didn't see Anthony Specca on defense. That was a bit of a surprise, considering when I asked James Franklin if Dom DeLuca is not available, who should we be watching for? He mentioned Dakari Nelson. He mentioned Tamir Robinson, but he really spent some time on Anthony Specca. Ultimately, credit to Dakari Nelson, because a month ago, he was just fresh to that linebacker room after playing safety for much of preseason camp. So Dom DeLuca was sidelined today. We saw him with a cast on his right hand, like protective gear there, covering up a thumb, wrist, hand area. And so we'll monitor his status, see if he's out on the practice field Wednesday as they approach next weekend's matchup against UCLA. But just something to monitor there at linebacker. Ultimately, I thought they did a nice job accounting for that loss over the course of this matchup and making up for it. And when we look over at offense, I think we can probably start with the fact that they were also a little bit of a scrambled situation because of injury issues. Very early in this game, they lost Sal Wormley. He started 30 consecutive games for them at right guard. Then later on in the matchup, JB Nelson is sidelined. He's the guy who checked in at guard when Sal Wormley exited. So you had freshman Cooper Cousins coming in for playing time. And I think kind of the unsung hero through 3 games for this offensive line. And now that we're into Big Ten play and maybe people paid a little more attention to what he did tonight, Venga Ioane is having a hell of a season. And he played left guard to start, which has been his home for the season. But when Sal Wormley goes down, he goes over to right guard. He spends a lot of time there. And you've got JB Nelson coming in at left guard. Now, remember, last week we saw Venga Ioane get some snaps at center. We've seen that on the practice field as well. And there was a moment in this game, I think it was right before on a play that produced a first down. He was lined up out wide and went in that pre-snap motion across the field, ends up being a lead blocker for Bo Perbula in that case, I think it was. We're talking about a 350-pound man going through pre-snap motion, lined up out wide. And so I just thought it was worth giving him a little credit, and also because he told us after the game that James Franklin challenged this offensive line early in the week, first day of practice on Tuesday, in a way that he says now in year 3 with the Nittany Lions, Venga Ioane says he's never encountered James Franklin having that kind of an emphatic message to the offensive front. And he feels like they accomplished that goal today and that they were able to get it done while having those pieces moving. And again, Wormley's been a staple of this lineup. JB Nelson's a high-quality backup. They didn't really rotate those tackles much, and Nick Dawkins was a mainstay at center. But again, this is an offensive front that if you threw this problem their way 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it gets ugly in a hurry and you're not running the football very well. Instead, they go and they run for more than 250 yards on the evening.
Yeah, I think both of us caught up with Ioane after the game, and I asked him about having those moving parts over the course of the day, and he said that this offensive line group is just so tight-knit, so close together that they're comfortable with whoever is in there and whatever they need to do. I thought it was interesting to see how they shuffled the pieces. I think both of us were a little surprised that when Wormley went down, that the move was to move Venga over and put in JB Nelson. I think both of us were initially expecting to see Cooper Cousins out there right away. He gets his chance eventually, and he entered mid-drive. And so to not upset the way the drive was going, he enters at left guard to keep Ioane at right guard through the rest of the drive. Then when Penn State offense comes out again, then they switch with Vanga on the left side and Cousins on the right side. It was just watching these pieces move. I think it's a real testament to Phil Troutline, the job that he's done with developing these players and being able to adjust on the fly. I think that that's something that can be discounted on occasion. So I just thought this offensive line played really well. I thought it was married really well with the run game and the attitude of those running backs. I think you just saw a very, very physical Penn State team, which is what you wanted to see against Illinois. You know Brett Bielema's reputation. You know Illinois' reputation. You knew what Illinois did the last time they were in Beaver Stadium 3 years ago and how that game went. And so to have this offensive line and to have these running backs play that style of game to answer that challenge, I think was really big and was a big factor in this game tonight.
Only got 14 snaps out of Sal Wormley. His status, the status of JB Nelson, things we'll be focusing in on. We'll get back into Beaver Stadium here on Monday to hear from James Franklin for a weekly press conference. We'll have availability on the practice field Wednesday. So some things to monitor there on the offensive line as well, just as we talked about at linebacker. And you know, by the way, Vanga Ioane has played more snaps than anybody on this Penn State team through 4 games. Redshirt sophomore. What a pickup he was at the very end of that 2022 recruiting class. It was already a really good class, but they added him. He was a former Washington commit out there in the Seattle area, and he has really found a home here in Happy Valley. Now, those guys did a hell of a job blocking, and the running backs did their thing too, because Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton, we've been seeing them for 3 seasons now, Daniel, you and I. This may have been the best that we've seen of them on the same night against a really quality opponent. Kaytron Allen, 18 carries, 102 yards, a touchdown. That's almost 6 yards per carry. Nick Singleton, 16 carries, 94 yards, a touchdown. That's almost 6 yards per carry. Singleton, 2 catches for 25 yards to go with that as well. So both of them are over 100 total yards on the same night. And ultimately, both of them agreed with James Franklin's sentiment after the game that there probably isn't a better running back tandem across college football. And I'm sure plenty of beat writers covering other teams, other running back tandems might have a debate with us. But we've seen these guys grow together. We saw Nick Singleton kind of fall off last year while Kaytron Allen remained Mr. Consistent. I feel like we are seeing the best version of Nick Singleton that we have now in year 3. And Kaytron Allen just keeps being Kaytron Allen. And these guys are emotionally invested in each other. And the team is emotionally invested in them. And I think you're seeing that throughout the way they play. I know Nick Singleton told me tonight the physical nature. And there was a play where he had a defender right in his crosshairs, right between him and the first down marker, and he bowled him over, got the first down. And Kaytron Allen, I think, afterwards said, reminded a little bit of him. That physicality you're getting from Nick Singleton now, along with the speed and his enhanced receiver skills, makes his backfield a lot more dangerous. And it was already thought of as a very dangerous backfield. Jaywan Sider's cooking with fire right now. And he went on to go to Twitter. He actually quote tweeted something I put out and said, best running back duo in the country.
And I think that you put them in the historical context of Penn State football. They're both over 2,000 yards rushing in their careers. And the last time that Penn State had 2 2,000-yard rushers on their roster was in 1971 with Franco Harris and Lydell Mitchell. I mean, that's some good company for a program like this. And also you factor in the era that we're in.
Yes.
This is the past couple of years, past decade has been so pass happy in college football. And so you have these 2 running backs that you can really
hold on. I thought you were going to go a different direction. How about the NIL transfer portal area?
That's
at the running back position, where it feels like
Yes.
every running back wants to be the guy, and it has worked for them. And we know there's been back channeling. We know that both of these guys have there's been feelers put out from other programs about maybe shifting things up, maybe making a little bit more money perhaps. But they are here at Penn State. They're working together. And ultimately, they're going to have less tread on their tires when they turn pro. And they're doing something special together. I don't think there's any denying that.
I think that when a lot of people talk about the transfer portal era, the NIL era, you kind of have to think of things in the short term and the long term. And I think that both of these running backs have bought into that long-term vision of not only making money at Penn State, being successful college players, but getting to that next level and getting that actual life-changing money that is in a real contract and that has to really be paid out to you, and potentially getting to that second contract and looking at things over the course of maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years as opposed to just 3 or 4 or 5. It's a different way to look at things, but I think that watching both of them play is really, really fun. They were so physical tonight. And to have Nick Singleton marry that physicality with his speed and what he's able to do just makes him such a complete back. I know that you made the comment that NFL scouts, what they're looking at now is a really, really complete back. And he's putting a lot of different stuff on tape with how he's being used, what he's doing in the passing game. And then Kaytron Allen, I mean, he is Kaytron Allen. And that's pretty much what it is. I was on radio in Champaign on Friday with Derek Piper from Illini Inquirer, and he and his co-host got a kick out of it when I read off Kaytron Allen's career stats of 5.2, 5.2, 5.3 yards per carry, and to see him get out into space, break some big gains. I know that he doesn't necessarily run away from people, but he's going to get you those yards, and he's not going to get stopped for a loss more often than not. And it's just very, very valuable to have. And I think that, you are looking at something pretty special at Penn State right now.
We talk about value. How about Tyler Warren? I mean, he had a 10-yard run on a direct snap that led to a first down. It's the second straight week with a first down run. And then he had a 3-yard run for a touchdown, but he also was involved in the backfield where he handed the ball off to Nick Singleton for a touchdown. Last week, we saw him throw the ball to Nick Singleton for a touchdown. And oh, by the way, he tied for the team lead with 4 receptions, and he now has 10 consecutive matchups in which he's caught a pass of at least 14 yards at 6'6", 260 pounds. So I feel like this is a familiar refrain for us, but Tyler Warren has been a real jack of all trades for this offense. And I still don't think that we've seen fully what Andy Kotelnicki has imagined for number 44, the next 8 regular season games and beyond, because you're tapping into his history as a quarterback. They're tapping into his physicality as a 6'6", 260 pound fast specimen. And of course, he's going to do what he does. Drew Aller looking in his direction in some very crucial moments, including a 3rd down conversion on the put away touch on one of those key touchdown drives late in the game. And so not only is he Drew Aller's go-to, it seems, when it matters most, but he's also Andy Kotelnicki's go-to for when he wants to really throw a curveball at the opposing defense.
In the past 2 weeks, Tyler Warren's caught a touchdown pass. He's run for a touchdown. He's thrown a touchdown. I mean, it's what else? What else can he do?
And he blocks pretty well in the ground game too.
Yeah, he is the jack of all trades, a real Swiss Army knife. I think the one thing about that package that I think the first time we've seen it, I don't want to say misused, but maybe be a little bit questionable, was that they had a 3rd and long where they put Warren back there and he just handed off to Kaytron Allen for a pretty short gain. And then Penn State kicked the field goal. I think that in that moment, you want to see something, maybe that doesn't feel like the right moment for that package. This package feels like something when you need like 5 or fewer yards. And so that was like maybe the one time that so far where I've been kind of like, that might be a little too cute. That might be overthinking it just a little bit. But I think overall, though, the results that you're getting from this, it's hard to argue with. Like the 3rd and 5 where he just goes 10 yards up the gut, runs over someone, and it just makes it look easy. I think that works into setting a tone, and is something too that is just a really, really good asset to have. So I'm excited to see what this looks like, how this expands, how they build on it moving forward.
And in speaking with Tyler Warren after the game, he sounds like someone who's just having a lot of fun in his role and getting the chance week to week to do some different things. And so we'll see what's next for him. Just quickly going over to Drew Aller and the passing game at large. This was the ground game leading the way this matchup. Aller right on his career, or on his season average, 71% completion rate tonight, 15 of 21, only 135 yards though. We didn't see the fireworks, Illinois trying to take away that deep pass as we thought they would. I thought there were a couple throws where Aller would like to have another shot at, whether it was a little bit erratic on the accuracy, maybe a little too high on the velocity on some of those throws. But overall, I think it was pretty impressive for Penn State to not need to rely upon Drew Aller and not need to rely upon those chunk plays downfield, and show a different method of getting to the finish line with a victory, and showing a different method of getting long drives out of your offense and putting a game away without Aller needing to throw bombs, which has kind of been the way it's worked through those first 3 non-conference games.
Yeah, I'm really curious to watch this game back and maybe look a little bit more at the Illinois secondary, see how they were playing, maybe hear from James Franklin earlier next week, like what they saw, because, they didn't really take any deep shots. There was the one deep ball to Omari Evans that led to a pass interference call. Franklin talked about it last week, I think, that when they throw that deep ball, if you miss, you want to miss short, because that gives you a chance to have something happen. Obviously, in the perfect world, you want Drew Aller to hit Evans in stride there and take it in for a touchdown. But I thought that Aller did a really nice job of taking what the defense was giving him, moving the chains, not forcing anything. And I think a big thing that stood out to me is that we'd seen Aller play that sort of conservative way before last year. And there were times last year, though, where it felt like he was leaving stuff out there. He was leaving stuff on his plate. Today, it didn't really feel like Penn State was leaving plays out there. Or if they did, it was just that third down where he rolled out and threw it too high, a couple shorter misses. But they were still, I think, good play calls. It was just execution on that exact thing. Whereas last year, it just felt like that there was just things that they just weren't doing. And so that stood out to me that, for Drew Aller to have that kind of quiet day, it didn't really feel like he was struggling, or it didn't really feel like something was missing. It still felt like part of the game plan, and it felt really natural. Of course, it helps having Katron Allen and Nick Singleton doing what they were doing today.
But what was Illinois' primary mission was to win the turnover battle. That was a really important thing for them. And Drew Aller didn't bite. Drew Aller did not give them those opportunities in the game. No turnovers on the day for Penn State. You're still looking at only 1 interception on the season for Drew Aller. He had that fumble on a mistimed snap in week 1. But again, just like last year, he's been really good at protecting possessions. And unlike last year, he's been letting the ball fly a lot more. So it's a nice balance from Drew Aller. Not so much today, but like you said, it didn't feel like Drew was struggling. The numbers, aren't staggering, 135 passing yards, but he kind of just did his job and allowed the offensive philosophy to go where it flowed today because of how Illinois played them, because of how the matchup went, because of where their successes were. And it's okay if Drew Aller, rides the coattails occasionally versus being the guy that you got to get, ride his shoulders to the 2 wins. Let's finish with a couple concerns here. 4-0, but not perfect by any means. Penalties. This is something that has kind of been every single week from James Franklin. And, when you see what the statistics were going into conference play for Penn State, they're toward the bottom end of the Big Ten in penalties per game and penalty yardage per game. And they had more issues in that department today. They had 6 penalties for 63 yards, but they had pre-snap penalties. They had, I believe it was at least 3 offsides defensively. They had some post-snap penalty or some post-play penalties, which hurt them, including that Illinois touchdown drive. And Franklin says it's a discipline issue. He says it's also a reputational thing now. He says they have a reputation as a defense that is going to jump the snap. And he said until they can fix that, opponents are going to take advantage of that. And he just said generally, like he said last week, he's not proud of sloppy penalties, of silly penalties. And it's something that they say from the coaches on down. Jalen Reed said it's the players need to kind of police it. but it's a discipline issue. And I'm telling you, this is just something that's starting to get a little scary if you're a Penn State fan, because when these games are hanging in the balance, those pre-snap things, they can ruin a possession. They can take you out of field goal range. They can ruin your red zone opportunity. And then those pre-snap defensive penalties, they'll give a smart quarterback, a chance to get a free play and take a shot down the field, or you'll set up a much more manageable third down, or you'll give a team a first down. And when that adds up in the wrong kind of scenario and the wrong kind of matchup, it can absolutely cost you the game.
The reputational part of it that James Franklin brought up was really interesting to me. I think that sometimes you tend to view these things as in the vacuum of this game, but then to think about that they are putting this on tape and these officials have their own way of preparing for games. And if you're doing something, they're going to be looking for it. They study the tape too. What you put on tape isn't just what's seen by your opponent. And so to have that sort of snowball, I think is really interesting, and something that if you're Penn State, you really need to lock in on. You got USC later this month. You got Wisconsin. We know Ohio State is looming out there. And I've said it so many times, you can't lose these games on the margins. And Penn State is putting themselves in a position to lose a game on the margins. I mean, I said it earlier, this was the type of game where you really felt like Illinois was hanging around. And, the wrong penalty at the wrong time, we saw it with that Tony Rojas call. It could really swing things. Luckily for Penn State, it didn't today, but who knows against Ohio State? Who knows against Washington? Who knows at USC?
We've had some conversations that have really been strong and good for some of the coaches on this staff. Tom Allen and the defensive turnaround today, and what Abdul Carter was able to do, wreaking havoc. The offensive line and Phil Troutwine and the job he has done overall in that culture, and Jaywan Sider in that running back room. But when you look at special teams coordinator Justin Lustig and what's ahead of him, this is, even more than penalties. We're talking about points off the board. And this was a one-possession game all the way, felt like, to the very end, until they were able to come up with a couple of takeaways and punch in another touchdown to make it a 21-7 game. And for a while, you're wondering, are those two missed field goals from Sanders to Haydak going to end up sending this game into overtime, or maybe end up getting Penn State upset by the end of the night? It didn't happen that way, but Sahaydak was wide left on a couple 40-yard field goals. We know that he had that miss in week 1 against West Virginia from 40-plus. He's 1 of 5 in his career from that range at this stage. And we saw Ryan Barker, second-year walk-on kicker, has done some good things in the practice field, but he was out there for the final extra point of the night. After this matchup, I followed up with James Franklin, just asked him how he plans to evaluate the kicker spot moving forward. He said a lot of nice things about Sanders Sahaydak, just about the kind of person he is, the kind of young man he is. He also said that he thinks Sahaydak should be able to celebrate with his teammates and enjoy this win. But he said, quote, ultimately there's going to be a competition. And so maybe that involves just Barker. Maybe we get Chase Meyer back involved, who transferred in from Tulsa after being their starter in 2023. But this is starting to feel like an untenable situation for Penn State, Daniel. All due respect to Sanders Sahaydak, the work he put in. You had a story up during the bye week about the confidence rising, but confidence dashed in a big way, not just for him today, but I think for Nittany Lions fans, for those of us who cover the team closely, who know that there are narrow margins of victory or losses ahead. You can't have it to feel like you're rolling the dice every time you trot out a kicker. And also wondering how it's influencing offensive game plan decisions. That moment there, they had 4th and 3 from the 17-yard line. Can you send out Sahaydak to make it a 10-point margin instead of a 7-point margin? They stay on the field. It ends up being a 2-yard pass. Aller was hurried. Fleming gets stopped short of the first down marker. And in that moment, I'm wondering, is Sahaydak's struggles influencing their way they're approaching their general game plan on offense? And it's when it starts to trickle into stuff like that, and it's impacting multiple phases of your team, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, when you talk about confidence, I think the one thing that you hone in on from James Franklin is what he didn't say. After Sahaydak missed that kick in the opener against West Virginia, in his Monday press conference, he came in and said, "We got a ton of confidence in Sanders Sahaydak." After this game, you asked him that question, and it was competition plus all the nice things about Sahadak, plus talking about the offense and the defense picking up Sahadak and playing complementary football. So I think you can read into that how you will. You can read into Ryan Barker being out there to kick that last extra point. This is one of those things that you hope you have it buttoned up in August. This is a thing that you have all the numbers, you have all the data, you're doing all these stress tests on these guys, and you should have everything locked in because this is so data driven and everything. But that mental side of it is just so big, and that's emerged as a talking point when it comes to Sahadak, with what Justin Lustig was talking about, what Sahadak himself talked about last week, that having that faith in him and having to really, I guess, reassess his mental approach. And in some ways he felt that it was helping him, that made those 2 kicks against Bowling Green, felt his confidence was high, hit all those extra points against Kent State, seemed like it was in a really good spot. But in these big spots, on the road at West Virginia, at home in an opener on national TV against West Virginia last year, today, national television, close game against Illinois, these moments, it just hasn't worked for Sanders Sahadak, which stinks. It's really tough to watch something like this happen to someone. But if you're Penn State, you have to reassess. You have to figure out how you're going to do this, because you need those points. You can't come out of a game leaving 6 points, 7 points, 9 points, however many it could be on the field.
A couple of things on special teams that feels like that needs to be addressed, and they got to figure out what they want to do moving forward there. They have to get more consistency and reliability. And then the punt returner spot, to me, just is something we can talk about later next week. But what are you getting out of that spot right now? I know Caden Saunders is doing a lot of fair catching. He's not been available for offense based on the lingering injury issues, based on what we've heard. But I think that's another spot you were getting so much out of it during the second half of last season. It was really setting your offense up. Has not been the case so far through the first third of this 2024 season. But some things to work on there for Penn State. There always are, regardless of the result. 21-7 victory for the Nittany Lions today. We'll see how they move up in national rankings. We expect them to move up because there were at least one loss ahead of them. It was a wild week of college football. There were some narrow misses on upsets elsewhere. Penn State escapes what could have been a scary matchup. It looked like it may have been a lot scarier down the stretch, but they don't have to sweat it out in the final moments. Thanks to some timely defensive plays, big time performance from their running backs. And as I said, that offensive line came together in a key way with a little adversity thrown its way today. Daniel, it is really early in the morning now. I think it's time to say goodnight or good morning, or however you want to phrase that. But you and I will be back on Monday along with Mark Brennan. We'll take another longer look at this matchup, cover some things that we may have missed along the way in postgame. And just want to give one quick shout out to a listener out there who performed surgery on my wife on Friday. And we was going through all the pre-op conversation about how he was gonna basically perform the surgery, how she was gonna recover afterwards, and so it was a very serious tone. Then he turns to me and says, "By the way, I listen to the Lions 24/7 podcast all the time," and he turns out to be a member of our Lions 24/7 community. And I just think that's a good example. We love our listeners out there. You run into them all the time within our community. Ran into some more here at Beaver Stadium today. But thanks, Doc, for taking care of my girl. She's on the mend now. But thank you also for listening to the podcast. And we appreciate all of you out there for making us a part of your Penn State fan experience. On behalf of Daniel Gallen, I'm Tyler Donahue. We'll talk to you real soon right here on the Lions 24/7 podcast.